Sometimes it's hard to hear those words, not just because the mic's not working. Anyone or anything that doesn't abide in God will be tossed into a fire. We hear that. Seems kind of harsh. What does that mean? Jesus says he is the true vine. And interestingly enough, although we treat this very particular in Jesus' case, there's others that have talked like this. The Buddha talked like this. Krishna talked like this. The Krishnamurtis, there's a couple of them out there, talked like this. And I think sometimes the risk, of course, is to confine ourselves in our thinking about this, not really taking into account how Christ talked about himself. We've talked about this a little bit so far, but I wanted to go to this verse specifically because here he says it all. He says, I am in you, you should be in me. I am the true vine, God is the gardener. Remain in the true vine as a branch of vine. Here we can see the complexity, but also the simplicity of what he's talking about. In a way, he's saying, I'm one with God. I no longer branch outward to things that aren't part of God, part of life, the way, the truth, the life. I'm life itself. I'm wholeness. I'm not the things that will naturally wither and die. And we're not talking about plants here. We're talking about destructive tendencies, selfishness, egotism. And egotism, not just in the arrogant idea of it, but in the sense of feeling separate from God. So it's interesting to think about this because God is infinite, right? And yet God is saying we must confine ourselves to the infinity of God. It's like, well, is there confinement in infinity? Surely not in the infinity of God anyway. Technically, there's an infinity between 0 and 1, and that's the number of decimal places you can fit between. 0.000001, add 1, you can keep going out with zeros. You can do that for infinity. There's infinite numbers in the decimal sphere between 0 and 1, but we know that's limited. That's just 1. 0 to 1 is 1. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever did this mind game where you thought about, well, if I got halfway closer to you, I could keep getting halfway closer to you, but technically I should never touch you, right? You can know, if you're always cutting something in half, never touch. Well, funny enough, God often says, I am infinite, but I'm not all the things that you think you know. The things that are passing are the evil in this world. The selfish modalities that stem from just the false sense of self we carry, really. Ignorance. Ignorance. It's funny to think that all of this comes from just an ignorance of our true nature. We ate from thinking we know, the tree of thinking we know, knowledge of good and evil. Thinking we know we're good, other people are evil, or where the separation lies between these things, knowledge. Whereas in fact, true knowledge is beyond something that we can imbibe in that way. It's living in a garden. In fact, Jesus says the truth is life itself. It's not even a collection of words, although those can point to it, those can embody it. Just like Christ can embody God. But truth is the way, is the life, is the vine that we live in. It's beyond words, it's with a capital T. And so there is confinement, so to speak, especially for our minds, because we have to invest less in what it keeps going on about. We have to notice that, heaven is within me, within me. Heaven underlies changeful creation. God, the one who never changes, as they say, underlies life, is the place we see from. How do we know things are things? Because we see from a place of no thing, so to speak. But in fact, it's the very essence of creation. It's the infinity of God. It's the lights of the world, as you call us, the lights of consciousness and love. So in a way, our minds will never want to get it, actually. Not really. We have to turn to a place that sees our mind, what we really are, noticing that, oh, that next thought kind of comes unbidden. I didn't put out an order for thoughts. And if I did, where did that idea come from, right? I didn't plan my day ahead, and if I did, well, again. But I am there. I am there to see it. I am this consciousness that experiences my thoughts. And there's a peace to that. There's a peace to that, and there's a will to that. But it's more subtle, I think, than our mind's will. And we empower our minds when we think that's it. It's not about beating ourselves up. It's not about trying not to think, actually. It's about noticing the heaven that is in our midst, that's within us. What is that will more subtle than the will of whatever needy thing we have in our heads right now? Whatever yearning we might have or not. You can notice it in yourself that there's a kind of will or a type of space that allows for that one to have a life of its own, so to speak. Allows us for a time to think and feel that we are separate and separated. That we are this thing we've been carrying around called our baggage and our idea of ourselves, our bodies, our problems. Here Jesus is saying, stop living out of God. That will be burned, or whatever, it'll disappear. He's saying that doesn't last. And sometimes we know it feels hard to be in this mindset where we feel separated, we feel vulnerable, we feel hurt, we feel anxious, we feel fearful, we feel anger that we can't get rid of sometimes. All these things, that's like the fire. That is the fire. Our state of being out of God, projecting ourselves as this separate entity, creates its own fire. God's not there to beat us up. God is the vine, it's not the fire. God is the gardener. And you could say it's all God, and in a way that's true. But there's a reason for this dynamic of suffering, unfortunately. And it's because, and it's so, that we come back to ourselves. We have motivation to learn some wisdom in a small group, as you all do, with friends, family, in our own head, as it always is, coming to a greater wisdom and respect for life and love. And noting that to some degree we don't have a lot of control over our minds. So we have to kind of accept them. But even in that acceptance and that newfound distance, there's a new freedom that starts trickling into our minds as well. That's our minds actually saying, wow, I'm empowered by the thing that I truly am, by my watchfulness, by my peace, my presence. It's an interesting kind of dynamic. And we don't have to really get it. What we do have to get, and what Christ is pointing us to, is the peace of God that we should remain in. He taught a gospel of turning around to the heaven within. It says he taught a gospel of repentance, but it was repentance meaning turning around. And as we hear in all his talks, he's always talking about union. It's so funny that, I grew up Baptist, which is evangelical, right? Southern Baptist, technically, I believe. Maybe American Baptist. My grandfather was a minister. And then Salvation Army, which is also evangelical, if you didn't know it. It is a church. Evangelical church. And I never quite heard this, that the thing that he says most often, it seems, be in me as I am in you. He's talking reciprocally. He's not saying he's a super special historical case that if you don't believe he lived 2,000 years ago, you're going to hell. He's saying, I am what I am. I am the way, the truth, the life. You can put a box around me, but I am the vine. And you are the branches. And he's inviting us to become one with this vine, and he's saying, remain in me as I remain in you. In that, I don't know about you, but I hear him saying, you're the vine as well, but there's part of you that's out there. He's like, I'm in you. He's the vine. He's in you. He's in us. And he wants us to remain in him. So he's saying there's part of us that's out there, that's a little too far out there. And when we're out there in the way that he's talking about, we want to control, we use other people for our own selfish purposes. Our minds can't help it, actually. We center in a false knowledge. And in fact, Jesus is inviting us to a place of not a true confinement, but the place of true infinity in life, wholeness, and love. Now let's take a few moments just to meditate.